We're going to take
Welcome to Canada, ma'am.
Thank you. Thank you.
You're very welcome.
Look at the old cars.
Each trolley is 20. I think we've got 43 today, so we're going to cram everybody into one trolley. You can sit on each other's laps.
Oh yes,
It'll be
look
great.
at that.
A romantic carriage ride.
Oh, look at that England car. The black England thing.
There's an eagle on this one. So
Okay, we're going to wait for the next one.
It's
Bald eagle just went by.
The salmon and that just running.
Great.
Here we are in Canada, and sitting on the pole waiting for this trolley. Here's a bald eagle sitting on the light stand. There he is. That's as far as I can go.
I can't see a thing.
There he is. See him? Yeah.
It is.
Here they're hooking up the trolley and the horses. There's our baby.
How'd you get that? Oh, there's more coming in front of us. They were They're very poorly constructed as well, so within the next 20 years we'll probably have them all torn down and some nicer looking buildings built. But excuse the 70s architecture that's interspersed here. We're working on getting rid of it. But I'll tell you a little bit of history of the city. Victoria was originally founded in 1843 as a fur trading post. It was established by the Hudson's Bay Company, which was at the time based out of London, England, and it was the largest international company in the world. They had sent ships out to every corner of the world to establish ports and settlements in order to exploit the resources that were found in these places. And what they were here for in Victoria was, they were looking for beaver and otter pelts. Some of the Europeans who lived in the fort actually tended their own trap lines, not many of them. Most of them traded with the local native people who lived here at the time. They were called the Lekwungen or the Lekwungen people, and they're related to the Songhees Indians that live on the other side of the Inner Harbor today. In the mid-1800s, the British started going into the Orient and they started bringing back silk. And the bottom fell out of the fur trade completely. The fur trade collapsed completely. And Victoria was in dire straits. We had no secondary industry here. It was fur and nothing else. We had a few whalers that we provisioned that came by, but certainly not enough to support the fort. And Victoria probably would have disappeared at that point. However, in 1858, gold was discovered in the Fraser Canyon. Now, the Fraser Canyon is on the mainland of British Columbia. We are on an island which sits on the west coast of the mainland of British Columbia. And if you go east of here, between the mainland and Vancouver Island, there are a bunch of little islands called the Gulf Islands in Canada. And down in Washington State, they're called the San Juan Islands. If you crossed over onto the mainland and you went up the Fraser River, you would get to the gold fields. The reason that everybody came here to Victoria was that our gold rush came right on the tail end of the San Francisco gold rush ending. And down in San Francisco, there were thousands of prospectors and miners and provisioners that were sort of wandering around wondering what they were going to do now that the gold rush was over in San Francisco. And when they heard that there was gold here in the Fraser Canyon, they all hopped on ships and headed up this way. Well, because the waters between Vancouver and Victoria are treacherous tidal waters in between all these little islands, all these fellows who had these ships, it wasn't economical. It wasn't going to make them any money to take them over to Vancouver. Plus, every time they went through there, the channels, they were risking their ships. So what they did was they just brought them up here to the very southern tip of Vancouver Island and kicked them off into the surf at the beach and said, you have to find your own way over to Vancouver. So within 1 year, in 1858 was the year the gold was discovered. By the end of 1859, we had nearly 30,000 people here. That in today's numbers would be like 20 million people arriving in a year. It was a pretty dismal place. After the 30,000 people had finished arriving, there was no housing, there was no sanitation, there was shortages of everything. It was basically a tent city, and this area that we're in right now is called James Bay, and this area had actually originally been used by the people in the fort as the farm for the fort. We were not on any trade lines whatsoever. We didn't have any trade coming here. Nothing was imported here at the time. So if you wanted to eat here, you either had to grow it, raise it, or go out and hunt it, which they did quite easily when there was only 600 people living in the fort. But when 30,000 people had arrived in the space of a year, it caused really, really severe shortages of everything. There was only one deep well, and that was right inside the fort. There were a number of shallow wells around the area, many of them actually, but of course, because there was no sanitation, using those shallow wells probably wasn't the best of ideas. But the gold rush brought an incredible amount of money into the city very quickly, and this part of Victoria actually was one of the first places to start to grow. The gold rush actually created a new merchant class here in the city. People who came here who had absolutely nothing and became richer than their wildest dreams in the period of months. They built their houses down here in James Bay in this area. If you came here and you already had money and you just got richer, you built your house in Rockland or Uplands or Oak Bay, which are about 15 minutes to the south of here. So this neighborhood grew up pretty quickly. The people who lived here were newly rich, so they really, really enjoyed showing off their wealth. One of the ways that they did that was they painted their houses many different colors. And they liked to paint them very dark colors because it was the darker pigments that were the most expensive. So many of the people who live in this neighborhood these days are actually doing some research on their homes to find out what colors they were when they were built, and they are restoring them to their original colors. Now, in order to be registered with the Heritage Society of Victoria, to register your home with the society, your home has to be 85 years old, and it has to have at least 3 colors on the outside of it. Once you register your home with the Heritage Society, the structure can never be torn down, and you can never change the structure of the outside of the building. You can do whatever you like inside. You could have it ultra-modern, you could have it retro, it wouldn't matter. And for that, the Heritage Society will help with up to 40% of any necessary repairs and renovations to the outside of the structure. Victoria did it pretty, they don't really have a lot of rules for the heritage houses, so it hasn't, in some cities like New Orleans and San Francisco, they have quite strict rules about what you can do inside as well. And people found that once they registered their homes with their heritage societies, that it often devalued their property a little bit. That hasn't been the case here in Victoria. It hasn't had any effect on the value of the home whatsoever. It's just that you can change the colors of the outside to your own preference. You just have to have 3 of them present in order to retain your heritage status. Now, Molly and Dolly have special shoes on their feet. They were actually partially invented by a fellow who lives here and actually works part-time for this company. They're used all over the world now. If you put metal shoes on their feet, usually you'd have to get a farrier to come in and or a blacksmith to shape the shoe to the side, to the shape of the animal's foot. Well, if you're going to use a rubber shoe, how are you going to do that exactly? Anyway, this fellow developed with another guy, developed what's known as a rubber shoe shaper. And they now are able to produce these rubber shoes. They're about 1.5 inches thick. They are made out of a man-made rubber, and they have a metal insert in the center. And these shoes do a couple of things. They protect the horses from the concussion that they would into their legs from their feet hitting the ground. When they have metal shoes on, that tends to be a bit of a problem. And it also saves the pavement, actually. When the horses were wearing metal shoes, they were actually breaking up the pavement from constant pounding. So now the horses are happy and the city's happier too. We've had horse and carriage in Victoria since 1907. There's been a trolley tour going through Beacon Hill Park continuously except for the war years. There was no trolley going through the park during the Second World War. But other than that, we've had a tourist trolley operating in Victoria for a very long time. People get a little upset with us. We are a bit annoying. You know, we do go very slow, and but for the most part, it really is quite remarkable how little aggravation we get from the drivers that we're probably really slowing down in their daily routines.
There's Gary Pitts' car.
Oh, yeah.
Walking.
Baby
Molly.
shoe car.
Dolly. Walking. Harbor ferries are lots of fun. If you want to go on one of those, they'll take you around the inner harbor. You can go to Fisherman's Wharf, and you can go over to West Bay Marina. The guys that pilot those boats are really knowledgeable about the inner harbor there, and they'll tell you all kinds of interesting stuff if you take one of the harbor ferries. If you like fish and chips, Barb's Fish and Chips down on Fisherman's Wharf are the best fish and chips on the planet. I know you guys are probably not thinking about eating, having come off a cruise ship. Walking, girls. Walking. Walking. Molly, relax. Good girl. Good girl, Molly. You're a good girl, Molly. Now, whoa. These two are actually my favorites. I love these two. There, see the difference? I didn't give you all whiplash there, did I? I was treating you guys like you were a big log attached to the back of me. That's not very nice. Now this is the stand where the single carriages stand.
Where they're talking.
All the horses are going to call to us probably.
They're talking. Hi, girl.
Look how they're looking.
Oh, they have a wax machine. Ooh, yes.
Hi, girls and boys. How are you?
That's a Parliament building.
Walking, Molly. Now, this is the British Columbia Parliament buildings. Molly, walking. Molly, walking. Walk, Molly.
There we go.
Now, these are Victoria is the capital of British Columbia. It's not the capital of Canada, so this is not the Canadian Parliament buildings. This would be like your state legislature in the States. This building was designed by a fellow named Francis Rattenbury. It was completed in 1897. Francis Rattenbury was quite an interesting young man. He also designed the Empress Hotel, which is to the left there. As we come along this tree right here, I'll show you the statue of Queen Victoria. She was the Queen of England when Vancouver Island became a colony of the Commonwealth. So the Empress Hotel is the flagship hotel down here. It's the heart of the inner harbor. It's every Victorian loves that hotel. People who come here and can't remember one other thing about Victoria, they usually remember seeing the Empress. Now the Parliament buildings there, they were completed in 1897. They were designed by a young fellow named Francis Rattenbury. He was 25 when he submitted his design to the design competition they were having. He actually lied on his resume, easy girls, and whoa. And on his submission, he told the committee that he had designed and overseen the construction of the City Hall in Bedford, England. That would have been extremely difficult for Rattenbury to do because the City Hall in Bedford, England was completed when Rattenbury was 5. So at the Heritage House, it actually didn't reside in that location. It was originally built and lived over about 20 minutes southeast of here. About 8 years ago, they poured that foundation and they put that building on a truck and trucked it over here and backed it in there and sat it down on top of that foundation. I like to tell people I have trouble backing up my horse trailer. I don't imagine I could ever put that building on that foundation. But they did, and it fits into this neighborhood really well. Now this is a palm tree right here. We have a very mild climate here. Palm trees thrive here very nicely. That little building with the store in it, the Birdcage's Lot Confectionery, that was the original carriage house for the house next to it. Because we were not near any trade routes whatsoever, and we had absolutely no trade coming into Victoria, we got everything really late. We didn't have any cars here in Victoria until 1926. So hello, how are you? Beautiful day, huh? Now, in James Bay, you'll find a lot of these houses that have little, what look like garages behind them. Those are actually the original carriage houses that people would keep their carriages in. The people who lived in this neighborhood would have kept their horses at a livery stable. Not many of them would have had their horses behind their home. But they would have had someone like me that they hired to go down to the livery stable and get their horse and clean it off and put all its gear on and bring it up and hitch it up to their cart or their wagon or whatever they had. And then they would have someone drive them out to do their shopping or visit their friends or whatever it is they were doing. So there's really quite a lot of carriage history still left in the city. If you go up Rockland Way, there's a big old heritage granite fence that was around the original estate up there, and all the way along probably 3 in every block, there are granite hitching posts still there. We have the tree huggers, the leftover hippies. They want the park to be all native plants and trees and, you know, only the things that were originally grown here, which I guess has its merit. And then we have the gardeners, because we are a city of gardeners, who want to plant all kinds of nice, unusual things for people to see. They seem to be able to strike a nice balance, though, and the park is, it's nice to see that many people actually care about what happens here. I think that's one of the reasons why this park is so well used and so beautiful. Now, the land for the park, it's 178 acres. The land was donated by a fellow named James Douglas. James Douglas was the governor of the first colony of British Columbia. And when he accepted that job, Queen Victoria gave him a whole bunch of land. And this was part of the land that she gave to him. And he donated this land to the city to be used as a park. And he made 2 stipulations when he donated the area to us. One was that part of the park had to stay in its natural state, so that the animals and the birds and such would have somewhere to hang out. And the other one was that no one would be able to make a private profit in the park. You could raise money for a non-profit organization or a charity in the park, but he wanted the park to be available to everybody. So to this day, you are not allowed to have any kind of private gatherings in the park that generate a private profit. Wow. My idea of heaven, I don't know, you might not all be animal lovers, but my friends won't let me go into the goat enclosure anymore because they always have, when the baby goats are in there, because I'll be elbowing the little 3-year-olds out of the way. That's my goat I'm petting it. My friends say, Jen, doesn't term children's petting zoo have any meaning to you? I say, not when it comes to a baby goat, I'm sorry. I was playing with that one. Now as we come along here, you'll be able to see the cute little critters. They're here on the right, just in this last enclosure. And it takes me all my might not to jump out of here and go in there and cuddle one, I'll tell you.
Oh, look at them.
So you can see them all in there now, all playing with they play with the little kids, and it's just, if you get a chance to come in here before you go home, those little baby goats are worth the trip. That was a peacock calling. I always think it sounds like somebody calling for help.
Boy, they're loud.
Molly walking. Good girl. Good girl, Molly. It's about 20 minutes north of here, and the people who live out there, the Sarlip, the nation that lives out there, they actually buried their elders in tree boxes. So it's really interesting that so close by there'd be 2 completely different burial rituals. But if you see those big boulders that are sticking up out there, just to our right, those are the boulders that they put on top of the burial sites of the elders of their community. They would also have many ceremonies. They'd have one ceremony that I think was quite interesting was they would, when their children started to walk, they would have a ceremony where they would bring the children up here to the top of the Beacon Hill, and they would bring their, what's equivalent to our crib, it's like a backboard, and they would have a ceremony to welcome the children into the land of walking people, and they felt the ceremony would have their children walk into a long life. Called the Harrison Yacht Pond. About 25 years ago, it became really popular. Hello, that's the owner of the company. She was just cleaning up poop when we went by. I was going to point her out to you. I was going to say, look at that. That's the owner of my company cleaning up the horse poop. Yeah, they're great. So this is the Harrison Yacht Pond. And about 25 years ago, it became very popular to sail these little yachts in these little boats in the duck ponds in the park. People started complaining that it was bothering the ducks, especially during duckling season. Well, as you can see, this yacht pond has straight sides, straight up and down like a pool. Well, the first year they put the pond in, the baby ducklings were born, and this little pond is exactly 8 inches deep, which is exactly the right height for a little duck to stick its butt in the air and eat the worms off the bottom. The ducks absolutely love this pond, and in the spring they bring their babies here. Well, the first year, because the sides are straight up and down and the babies can't fly yet, once the babies got in there, they couldn't get out, so they added all those little ramps that you see around the edge. And the ducklings should be hatching any day now, actually, and they go in there with their moms and swim around, and then they go ding, 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 up those little ramps up to the top. It's hilarious. So, so much for, you know, creating this pond so they could run their little ships in there. The ducks totally took it over. Although they do still have, like with the RC boats now, they have full-on regattas in there in the summertime, like big competitions where they're racing them, and it's really a big, getting to be a very